this time. That has bought us some time for Nicolas Burtey's talk, which I'm going to introduce on the stage now. Nicolas, welcome to the stage. I think you feel at home here, don't you?
Thank you.
Have a wonderful presentation. Merci beaucoup et très bon courage.
Merci. All right, I'm Nicolas Burtey, the CEO of Galloy and the host of this conference. A month ago, I had to book tickets to go from Switzerland to here to the conference and going back to Africa. And I spent more than an hour to book a couple of plane tickets. And I was thinking, like, doesn't make sense, right? We are in 2022. Why should I spend so much time to book tickets? Doesn't make sense. And this was a genesis of this talk. And I want to explain you how to book plane tickets in the next 30 minutes. No, I'm kidding. I want to talk about the sovereign organization and how Bitcoin empowers organization. My talk is split in 3 parts, like why paying for an airline ticket sucks today. Then think about what would be the world if an airline was on the Bitcoin standard, and then I've share some thoughts about the path for sovereign organization. Okay, so the reason I had to spend 1 hour to book plane tickets is just because the current system is broken. And so I had to figure out, okay, which credit card to go from Miami to El Salvador and which credit card to go from like France to Africa and things like that. And it's, it's just a mess. And on top of it, of course, like a couple of hours after I booked my tickets, my credit card was suspended. One of my credit cards was suspended because, why do you go to El Salvador? Like, do you want to control your money? Like, is it safe? Like, I don't know. Like, but, Brexit decided that no, sorry, you can't do that. I will cancel your credit card, which is crazy, right? It's my own money. I should do what I want with it. And then it triggered for me the idea of like, okay, why is paying today in 2022 for travel so complicated, so cumbersome, right? I start thinking more about it. And the reason is because it has to do with the current broken banking system today. So let's dive into this. If you're an airline today, you are operating in different countries. And the complexity to operate in many countries is super high. And it has to do with the fact that each country has their own currency, which, if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. But what does it really mean? It means that maybe as an airline company, you need to have a bank in all of those countries you're operating. So maybe you're an airline in Latin America, and you have to have a bank in Argentina, you have to have a bank in Colombia, you have to have a banking access in El Salvador, in Mexico. And between those different countries, there is very little payment interoperability. If you think about El Salvador, there is 2 payment systems. There is 2 ACH systems. There is one operating by the banks, and there is one operated by the central bank. But those payment systems, they can't be used for sending a payment to Mexico, because it's a different banking payment rail. And so there are solutions for that. There are global payment network, like Visa and MasterCard. And this is what you will be using if you want to book an airline, where you use one of these payment systems that work cross-border. But there is some limitation with this. One of the limitations is that those payment network, and there is very few of them, right? Like it's almost a duopoly for like Western countries, it's Visa and MasterCard. Those payment networks are very restrictive intermediaries, right? First, they're very profitable. Like generating a ton of cash. But they also have their own rules. They decided the rules of how payment works, how payment doesn't work, and they can almost do whatever they want. And one thing they said is, there should be customer protection, and so if we're not sure about the payments, it will decline the payments, and there is a lot of fraud that result with chargeback. You never know if the person initiating the payment is, the one that have the money, or if the account is compromised. But basically, in the airline industry, there is a ton of fraud. And this is one of the main issues why today it's so complex to book an airline ticket is fraud, and the fact that those payment networks authorize chargeback. And so when I have to book these tickets, I have to think about, okay, I'm booking a ticket from Miami to El Salvador. Maybe I should not use my French bank account. Maybe I should use my US bank account. But my IP address is, I'm in Switzerland, so maybe I should use a VPN so that my IP address now is in the US, and maybe after the first tentative, the payment will go through, right? And I know how to do that because I'm building payment system. I'm in the Bitcoin space and I understand payment well, but how many people will have give up, after 3 attempts? A lot, right? And this sucks. Another thing that airlines have to think about, if we step back a little bit, is inflation, right? Now you have different currency, and you have to think about, okay, as an airline, I have cash from Guatemala, I have cash from Argentina, and maybe the inflation in Argentina is super high, and so you're like, okay, maybe I should move this money quickly from Argentina back to, I don't know, the US dollar or Mexican pesos. And the issue with inflation, as we know now, is that it's a moving target, right? The inflation is changing quickly, days over day, months over months. And now as a airline company, you need to be thinking about, okay, you need to become almost a macro expert to see how to move the money around, right? And does it make sense, really, right? As an airline company, you want to travel people from point A to point B. You don't want to become a macro environment expert. But today you don't have a choice. You need to think about that. You also have a lot of fees when you book tickets, right? You are using one currency. Maybe if you're using a French credit card, you're using a euro, but maybe you're booking a plane ticket. The payment processor is in the US, but maybe the airline is in Mexico. And so you have different foreign exchange fees that stack up because of the fact that different countries have different currencies. You also have, as an airline, to think about maybe capital control, right? Maybe you operate in some country where you're not allowed to export the currency. If the inflation is high, what a country will do is they will say, okay, we want to limit inflation, we want to limit the fact that people sell our currency, and so we are going to have cap on how much can a currency being sold every day, every month. And so, as an airline company, you also need to think about, I need to understand the law, how the law might change in the future. So you also need to become a legal expert just to process payments. And does it make sense? I don't think so, but this is the case today. So there has to be a better way, right? And I'm sure you know where I'm going to. If only there was a global network to solve this. And so let's think about an environment where an airline will operate on a Bitcoin standard. What will it mean, right? The first thing is you will have an amazing payment user experience, right? As a user, I will not have to spend 1 hour to figure out, okay, how can I process the payment, given what I know about how payment system works. I will see a QR code. I will open my wallet. I will scan the QR code, and boom, payment is done, and that's it. Maybe I use WebLN, but the payment should take seconds, right? Maybe 1 minute top. The payment should not be 1 hour to process. And so I can be more productive in my life. Just better. If we were to use Lightning, So the payment will be instant, the feedback will be instant, but also the airline now will know that there is no chargeback. And it's good because now they can just issue my ticket, like it's instantaneous, and the airline will also be more productive, there will be less fraud. Also, I mean, maybe if we live on a Bitcoin standard, there is no longer a credit card, debit card, but like, of course, like I don't have to have my credit card being cancelled just because I book an airline. Like that doesn't make sense. The fee will be so much cheaper. It's hard to know how much credit card charge for like a company because again it depends on the jurisdiction you are in. What is the currency of the issuer? What is the currency of the recipient? Is there foreign exchange fees? But you can assume that in many countries, credit card processing fees might be 5% up to 10%, which is like a lot when you think about it, right? If you were to use Lightning or Bitcoin, the payment will be in basis points, maybe 10 basis points, 0.1%, maybe 0.2%, maybe 0.5%, but that will still be 1 to 2 order of magnitude better than the current system. What this means for the people flying is that the costs will be lower, right? Because all the costs that is spent today on setting up banking infrastructure, having lawyers to figuring the law, the payment processing fees that MasterCard and Visa and the payment intermediary are charging to the airline company, all the chargeback, all this, at the end of the day, you are paying it, right? You are paying in the form of like, you have to pay higher fee for traveling. And if we are living on a Bitcoin standard, like the travel will be cheaper. Another element that Bitcoin and the Lightning standard will bring to an airline will be greater privacy for customer. Like if I'm traveling around, like why do you need to have my address? Do you want to ship me some mail or something? Like, doesn't make sense, right? The reason this airline probably asks you for your address is because it's a fraud check, right? It's like, okay, Nicolas, tell me where you live. And now I'm going to compare this to like all the information I can scrap you online with some API. And if the address you give me map what I think you should be living, maybe I'll be more likely to accept your payment. But that doesn't really make sense at the end of the day, right? You don't need to know where I live. And I'm probably not at home anyway if I'm traveling often. Now, if you think about the benefits for an airline, right, like from you plug into the Lightning ecosystem, you're operating globally from a payment perspective from day one, right? You don't need to spend as much time thinking about the payment flow. You don't need to think about the different payment system in each country, how to optimize this. Like, no, you have one unified system. You're plugged to this, and that just works. Even if we live in the transition to hyper-Bitcoinization, you could still hedge to your local currency. If you have to pay tax, maybe a Mexican airline could say, okay, I still need to have pesos to pay my tax, maybe. But the good thing about this is you can hedge whenever you want, 24/7. You can't do that with traditional market, right? If you receive a payment in Argentina on a Sunday morning, the reality is that banks are closed, and if you know there is a super high inflation in this country, you need to wait 1 day, 2 days, right, to convert the currency, and you're losing money on this because maybe inflation in this country is super high, and you have no way to hedge, quickly. With Bitcoin, you can hedge whenever you want in any currency, which is also another benefit of being on a Bitcoin standard. And I know you can even think further, and you can say, okay, as an airline become more sovereign, you can even think about they can have better governance systems, they can hold their own keys, they can have multi-sig systems, some things they cannot do today in the current environment. Okay, now I'm going to talk about what is the path for sovereign organizations. So let's think about how organization can be moving from the fiat world to the Bitcoin world. And the way I'm thinking about this, and we're thinking about this maybe inside Galoid. Inside Galoid is probably the experience will be very similar to an individual, right? I start on my Bitcoin journey by probably using my credit card, buying $20 worth of Bitcoin on an exchange. And I'm sure probably many of you did, some years ago, when you get started, you say, oh, your friend said, hey, you should really look into this, that's great, buy some, and you do, and then you maybe leave it on the exchange, because you don't realize yet that Bitcoin is very unique. And then, oh shit, like the exchange I buy Bitcoin from, suddenly pause withdrawal, and you're whacked. Sorry. But then you say, okay, let's learn about self-custody. You understand that Bitcoin is quite unique, and it's not like what you used to. And maybe you also go and make or buy a hardware wallet, make a hardware wallet, and you progressively over time, it may take some days, some weeks, some months, some years. You become more self-sovereign, right? And there is a path to get there, from a custodian to like having your own key. How does this map to organization? The way we think about it, it will be similar, in the sense that probably, as an organization, you will be starting with a custodian or with a payment processor, right? Because this is what you're used to as an organization, right? You have a bank, you have your different payment processor, and so you're like, here, maybe I should, yeah. If you're more thinking using Bitcoin for the asset, okay, which custodian should I use? They will keep my money. If I'm using Lightning and I want to use Bitcoin for like processing payment, maybe you will work with the companies that have API, you will integrate the API, you don't have to manage the liquidity, you just, at the end of the day, maybe there's some new fiat to get started. But you probably start very similarly to how you start as an individual, right? You trust someone else. This is what you used to do, and probably that's fine, right? And this is probably where we are today in the world of path to sovereign organization. Is I don't think we are as advanced as we are for individual, right? For individuals, there is a lot of today documentation, and I mean, obviously with what's happening in the world today, like all the exchanging, having withdrawal issue, everybody said, oh, get your hardware wallet and move your phone to your hardware wallet. But we also think that, from the standpoint of an organization should also become sovereign. And so, okay, now you plug to the Lightning system, maybe you process payment, and now you can start building internal familiarity in the organization about Bitcoin. And maybe because, okay, you plug to Lightning, now, instead of having to pay 5% to process transaction, maybe you're paying 0.5% to process a transaction. And imagine you're an organization where, like, when you receive $100, your net profit at the end is $5, right? You have 5% margin. If you switch to Lightning and now you no longer pay 5% to process transaction, but 0.5%, suddenly it's almost you double your margin, right? And so you're a lot more profitable as an organization. You double your cash flow. Like it's awesome. And so when you're there, you're like, okay, maybe with this better P&L. Now I'm making more profit because I'm plugged to the Bitcoin standard. Now you can start to orange pill, maybe the different board member. Of course, it depends on the type of organization, right? If you're like a MicroStrategy and you have Michael Saylor that have a large share of the company, it's easier to nudge the board member to say, hey, you should really look into this. But maybe a more traditional organization, you will need to convince your board member. And a good way to do it is to say, since we adopt the Bitcoin standard, we're more profitable. We maybe crush on competitor. Like, we should probably double down because it's a good thing to do that, right? You have no better argument to convince board member if, like, you get more profitable. And so it's probably, will go like this. And then you can bring up the idea that, hey, Bitcoin is a unique asset, right? Like, we custody today all of assets with banks because this is what the traditional financial system does. But maybe here it's different, right? We can take custody of our assets, and maybe now we can buy some hardware wallet and think about multi-sig strategy and things like that. And eventually, we could also run our own node. Like, why do we need to use third-party payment processor? Like, Bitcoin allows us to process our payment ourselves. We will maybe be even more profitable if we do so. and we don't have to trust anyone else, right? And the process will go slowly. Today, most organizations are not in this stage where they want their own node. Like it's very early, I think, but eventually in the next couple of years, we hope that more organizations will understand that they can do that, and it's a unique value proposition of Bitcoin. I also think that most of the software stacks that organizations will be using will be open source software, because it will be the more secure software, it will be peer-reviewed, and so we think the path to organization is like on a foundation to open source software, and this is what we are building at Gallery, and so we are developing the tool for organizations to become sovereign in the future. If you want to know more, we have some Mattermost and GitHub, so feel free to go to our website and learn about sovereign organization. We have also blog articles that are coming to talk more about this idea of sovereign organization. With that said, that's the end of my talk, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask now. We have a couple of minutes, or otherwise feel free to stop to our booth. Thank you.
Off I go.
Check. I'm curious, what do you think this airline example is really interesting, but do you have any guess in terms of like what industries might be first in terms of where organizations might start to do this soon?
I think the airline is, I don't think anyone yet in the airline industry are thinking about this, but for me it's so obvious that it will be an obvious use case. I think otherwise it's really, and it's an obvious use case because just the user experience sucks for the user, but airline company need to, it's complex organization, so I think it will take time. Certainly a use case is the communities that are outside or that are where the current system cut them. So if you're an activist, if you're maybe the adult industry, everything related to gambling. But now gambling is really like shitcoin driven, but eventually the idea of like just using Lightning, I think, will make a lot of sense. So this is probably the first type of organization to jump on it. But it's also like, as a country, right, like now if you want to be more sovereign, like I think it's also a very good idea to say, you know what, let's build maybe a parallel system with Bitcoin and Lightning, and let's become independent. And so I think countries, another obvious use case, probably the country that doesn't have their own currency will be the first to start. We see that with El Salvador, it's an obvious one.
No questions? Oh, sorry. Didn't see that.
What role do you think accountants and advisors could play in building out this sovereign organization movement?
I think it's key. The role of accountant is key because it depends on the country, but in many countries, like today, the regulatory framework, maybe the tax implication, is like a limitation to adopt Bitcoin. It really depends of like, do you have to, is it a taxable event to convert Bitcoin to fiat or vice versa? And if it is, then, like, it's adding overhead today. So, there could be software to automate that, but if the organization is a country where like it's not, it's a commodity, it's not a security or something like that, then it's definitively better. But accountant can help to go through these, issues.
Yeah, so orange pill the accountants and the board.
Yeah, accountant. It's accountant is probably the lawyers. Make them feel comfortable from a regulatory standpoint. But it's also like maybe the IT department. The people need to be comfortable running a node, and the fact that it's the code is well tested, it's secured, so it's also make it easy, to run your infrastructure on Bitcoin. I don't think today it's easy. I think we are trying to make it easier as an industry, but today running your own infrastructure on Bitcoin, Lightning, require a lot of developers, and the idea is that you should not need developers, right? You should have tools that are available off the shelf to be connected to the Bitcoin industry. Thank you.
Do you still have time?
I'm not, I don't know. The
Oh.
time is not showing anymore.
Okay. No other questions?
I
Oh,
think
there's
I
one at the back. Making me work for it. Good man. Oh, 1 more minute. Oh, okay. Back I go. We can wrap up there if not.
Yep.
Yeah?
All right, thank you.
Can we have a round of applause from Nicolas? I mean, I did have a question, Nicolas, but it was just simply when Lightning. Sorry.